Hello everyone. I welcome you all once again to the series of lectures on Introduction to DBMS. So in the previous lecture, we discussed attributes in the entity relationship model, including the different types of attributes, and some important MCQs were also discussed. In this lecture, we will move to another important component of the ER diagram, which is the relationship. So we already know that in the ER diagram, mainly it consists of entities, attributes, and relationships. So we have discussed entity types and attributes in the previous lectures. So now in this lecture, we will understand what exactly relationship is and what are its types. So what is a relationship? So a relationship represents an association between the different entity types in the database. So in simple words, a relationship tells us how different entities they are connected or they are associated with each other. For example, suppose we have two entity types, student entity type and department entity type. So a student enrolls in a department. So similarly, if we have the bus entity type and the student entity type, a student may be plying in a particular bus route. So here plying in is the relationship. So just remember that entity type or the entities, they represent any object, while the relationship, it represents association between these entity types. In the ER diagram, a relationship is generally represented using a diamond shape. So in the ER diagram, entity type is represented with a rectangle, attribute is represented with an oval, and relationship is represented with a diamond shape symbol. Another important point to note is a relationship should have a meaningful name. That describes the association. For example, student enrolls in department, employee works in department, a student enrolls in a course, doctor prescribes medicine to patients. The relationship name should make the association understandable. So when we see the example over here, so we have three entity types: bus, student, and department. So you see how beautiful the relationship name is written. So plying in, it is a relationship between bus entity type and student entity type. Similarly, another name of the relationship, enrolls in, it is a relationship between the department entity type and the student entity type. These names, they make the relationship so understandable. Next, relationships, they can involve many entity types. A relationship does not necessarily have to involve only two entities. So depending upon the number of entity types participating in the relationship, we can classify relationships as unary or binary or ternary or n-ary. So for example, unary relationship, it will have only one entity type. Similarly, binary relationship will have two entity types. Ternary entity type will have three entity types, and n-ary relationship shall have n entity types. So the important point here is that the classification is based on the number of entity types participating in the relationship. So this brings us to the concept of degree of relationship. So first we will see unary relationship, where only single entity type is involved. So here only one entity type, it participates in a relationship. So since only one entity type is involved, we call it recursive relationship or reflexive relationship. Let's understand this with the help of a beautiful example. So here student is there and a relationship called as coordinated by. It is there. Only one entity type is involved, that is student. So at first glance you may think that there are two student type entities because the word student it is appearing twice. But it is not correct. So there is only one entity type called as the student entity type. So we can conceptually say that student coordinates student. Two occurrences here, they represent basically the two different roles which are played by the instances of certain entity type. So let's see, for example, in a college, a student can act as a CR, that is the class representative of another student. So both participants, they are the students only. So, but we don't need two different entity types for that, such as the coordinator entity type. It is not required. So both belong to the same student entity type only. So another common example is employee supervises employee or employee manages employee. So here both the sides they belong to the employee entity type only, but one employee plays the role of a supervisor and another employee plays the role of a subordinate. So here unary relationship involves only one entity type. That is very important point. It is also known as recursive or reflexive relationship. It is also very important. Now coming to the degree of relationship, so you have to point this thing. The degree of relationship, it means the number of entity types participating in the relationship set. So for this example, only student entity type it is participating. Therefore, degree of relationship is 1. Now let's move to the most common type of relationship, which is the binary relationship. So a binary relationship involves exactly two entity types. So look at this example. Here student is enrolled in a course. So here we have two distinct entity types, student entity type and course entity type. Therefore, it is a binary relationship. So a student can enroll in a course and a course can have different students enrolled in it. So the relationship establishes an association between two entity types, the student entity type and the course entity type. So since two entity types are involved, the degree of relationship is 2. Another example can be an employee, he is working in a department. So employee works in department. So it is connected through the relationship called as works in relationship. So an employee works in a department and a department can have many employees. So since two different entity types they are involved, this is a binary relationship and again the degree of relationship is 2. So one important point to be noted is binary relationships, these are the most common type of relationship in the database design. For example, student enrolls in course, employee works in department, customer places order, doctor treats patients, student belongs to certain department. So in each case you see here exactly two entity types they are participating. Now let's move to the ternary relationship. So it is a relationship in which exactly three entity types are participating. So look at the example in this slide. So we have the doctor entity type, the medicine entity type, and the patient entity type, but the relationship is prescription or prescribes. So the relationship represents the association among all the three entity types: doctor, patient, and medicine. For example, a doctor prescribes a particular medicine to a particular patient. Therefore, the degree of relationship is 3 and hence it is called ternary relationship. So you may wonder why we need a ternary relationship. Why can't we simply create separate relationship between doctor entity type and patient entity type, or doctor entity type and medicine entity type, or patient entity type and medicine entity type? Why can't this happen? So the reason is that three-way association contains information that may not be captured correctly by considering them separately, pairwise. So you may ask, which medicine that a particular doctor prescribed to a particular patient? So that involves three different entity types. It needs doctor entity type, patient entity type, and medicine entity type together. Therefore, a ternary relationship may be appropriate in this case. Now we move to the n-ary relationship. So an n-ary relationship involves n entity types. In this example presented here, we have many entity types. For example, supply entity type, parts entity type, project entity type, warehouse entity type, and these are all participating in the relationship called the supplies. So the relationship connects all the four entity types. So we can think of it as a particular supplier supplying a particular part to a particular project through or at a particular warehouse. So here four different entity types are mandatory. Therefore, here the degree of the relationship is 4, and for n-ary relationship we can call it the degree of relationship as n. So when we summarize all the things that we covered in this lecture, so a relationship, if unary, it has only one entity type and the degree is 1. If the relationship is binary, there are two entity types and degree of relationship is 2. If the relationship is ternary, we have three entity types and the degree of relationship is 3. And finally, if the relationship is n-ary, then n entity types will be participating and the degree of relationship will be n. So in this lecture, we discussed about the relationship in the entity relationship model. We learned that the relationship represents an association between the entities and is represented using a diamond symbol in the ER diagram. Then we classified the relationship based on their degree into unary relationship, binary relationship, ternary relationship, and n-ary relationship. So we understood that the degree of relationship is the number of entity types participating in that relationship. In the next part, we will further explore the relationship through the concepts such as cardinality, participating constraints, and different types of relationship mappings. So thank you.